Hey, good morning, friends. Hello. We come to another day of time together. Another day of technical challenges. Things that, but we're getting there. So hope you're glad you're a part of it. And that we can spend a little time together today. Good morning, Karen. Hope you're doing well. So that the day is treating you well. Robin, hello. Glad you are here. Hey, good morning. Good morning, Yvette. Glad you're making it. Hello. I just might have to give up on my computer. It is giving me all kinds of trouble these days. Good morning, John. Glad you're here. Part of this journey. Hope things are well for you. Hello. Good morning, Linda. Glad you're here. Hope you're having a good day. Good morning, everyone. So glad you're here. Let's get going this morning. It is the 15th day of February at, somewhere near 11:11. And I'm glad you're with us and you found this moment to take simply a moment to, outside of the busyness, outside of the work, outside of the things that you're doing, to take a moment and hold this apart just for a second. You might spend some time with people who recognize your name and are glad you're here, that you might rejoice in the work of your day, not in the, you're going to get all the things done, but in the fact that you are in it and you are held by God in it, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. This is one of my more favorite Psalms that I want to read you today because I believe it offers us something of our experience of God. You'll sometimes hear it read at memorials, but I think it actually brings us a whole lot more depth than simply the contemplation of our mortality. So this is the 121st Psalm of David. So I just want you to hear it, and we'll talk about some elements of it here because that's what we're going to do today. It's how we're going to roll. So, I lift my eyes up to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who is the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep you and keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this day forth and forevermore. I think if there's one word in that, if you notice, that just keeps repeating itself, that we are kept by God, that we're in the business of being kept, that in fact one of God's core functions in how God operates in our life is the task of keeping us his own, keeping us in the light, keeping us in the midst of the goodness of our life, that the Lord is your keeper. I read this and, I've got a weird associative brain, but, I don't know if you ever remember, if you're a kid of a particular age, when you went to school, there was this thing called a trapper keeper, which was, and the cool kids had trapper keepers. Like they had all these little folders and little stuff that you could put, like it opened up, like it had Velcro back when Velcro was actually a thing that was novelty, like you open it up and you have all the files and have all your things together. And you keep all your whole scholastic world together in your trapper keeper. And it was this real, and you could tell who the cool kids were because they they might have blinged out their trapper keeper, like they had a thing on it, or Robin's had a kitten on it. There you go. Why am I not surprised that it's like if the really cool kids had their trapper keeper blinged out in some sort of way. This notion that we might, this, I think this is, Jeremy, mine was blue. That's so awesome. But this, I'm going to consider this, because this is such to me, it's this, microcosm of the macrocosm reality of that we hold on to, that here we are, in our little short pants experience, and we're given the trapper keeper to kind of keep our things together. Now we have our file cabinets or our phones or our digital folders or however we, and I'm not just talking about organization. I'm talking about a desire to have kind of mastery over things. That this begins really early, and that we could keep these things. Right here in town, one of our favorite little spots, Lasergate, where we'd go and kind of play laser tag, has gone away, and it is being remodeled, and it's being remodeled for a storage unit company. How fun is that? But the world, we particularly drive around sometime and just open your eye, just go looking for storage places, and you'll find they're everywhere. I don't know the numbers on how many people, how much stuff we as Americans kind of accumulate and then pay to hold on to because we don't have room for our stuff in this world. And don't hear me, I'm not a minimalist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not Marie Kondo. I'm not going to hold this up and say, does this spark joy? That's not where I'm going with this. I'm just saying, this notion of us keeping things and holding on to things and bringing some order to our world, we like to think we get over it, but our trapper keeper just has, a padlock on it with different things on it now as we're older. It's the same mechanism. And so here we are trying to keep our little lives together, and yet the Lord, and this is, I think it's just a symbol that and this nascent, small kind of idea in our image of what God actually has for us all the time, that is ever and always present for us, that God has us, this might seem elementary in terms of our understanding, but that God has us. That the Lord is your keeper. Just like it says in verse 5, the Lord is your keeper. Like he's got you, no matter where you are in life. We like to think God has us when, all the things are going well and everybody likes us and we look good and we fit into our pants properly and everything's like that. But that's not quite, and we've been sold that bill of goods too. Like, there's a place for us, like, oh, you're a good boy. And when you're being a good boy, then, you'll get the num-nums, and then, your trapper keeper is acceptable to the Lord or whatever, But that's not what the psalm tells us. Quite the opposite, actually. That God has got us, even in the depths of our misbehavior, even in the depths of our brokenness, even the depths of our shame, even in the depths of our hurt, even in our weakness. God has us, and that has us in a way that is ever and always protective. Now you can say, whoa there, preacher guy. Like I've had horrible things happen in my life, and no doubt, if you're going to spend some time in this life, something horrible is going to betide you. Your heart will be broken. Things that will take place that you will not understand, and that will grieve you, and that they'll just, no matter how bulletproof you think your faith is, they'll get under that armor and they will shuck you like an oyster. It will happen to us. But that's not outside of the providence of God. That's not outside God's trapper keeper for us. That's not outside God's ability to hold and to nurture and to hold us in goodness and light, even in the midst of that. we think about the things we don't have that we pray for, or things that we want, or the things that don't come to pass because we pray, and we can get ourselves all wrapped up about how our prayers weren't sufficient, or the Lord, if it's someone that's passing, maybe the Lord needed another angel, whatever like curveball we want to put on that to make ourselves feel better. But I would encourage you to try and get out of that business, because it really doesn't serve us, nor does it serve our connection with the Lord, that things can actually be just as grisly and just as awful and just as disappointing as they actually are. And that even in that, the Lord has us. This, that second part of the 5th verse, the Lord, there's a shade at your right hand. This notion that the things that you're doing, that God's protecting those. There's shade over it in a world where it gets 130 degrees. That to have a shade over the things that you're doing is to have this protection. I often find this. I used to say this in the Army chaplaincy when we would talk about things that kind of people would come home with unresolved. That the people would redeploy with, having experienced great trauma, and things weren't right. Things weren't, their head still wasn't right, or their heart still wasn't right, or they knew they were carrying things home, or they knew that there was a heaviness about their being. And what I would try to remind them of, I said, look, and my fellow chaplains too. When I was helping and lead them. They would often be heartbroken about the ability to care for the soldiers that they had, and they would diminish their efforts in some ways and say, I just don't feel, I don't know if I helped my soldiers because I still see them them struggling with what's taking place and what's going on, and I the way I have approached that and what I offered them was, look, there's work to do there. There was work to do there, and then there was work to do when you get home. And I think that, and as I've held that in time, I think there's a broader truth there. There's work to do in each season of our life. There's work to do in as the great line from Ecclesiastes of, there's a season for everything, and that there's a way in which, and that God has that, and that if there's a rock in your shoe, maybe there's a time that maybe we walk without rock for a while until it's time for it to come out. If there's a grief in our heart, or maybe if there's a dysfunction present in our life and we can't get our arms around it, or we're somehow in the midst of struggle with something, or maybe we're just completely, we've looked back at our lives and we find that we were completely blind in a whole season of our life. I would submit to you those times when you look back and, so stupid. I wasted all that time. I hear that a lot. I wasted all that time. There's no wasted lumber. There's no wasted time in the economy of God. If it was not in your consciousness, if there was a struggle in your heart and there was not purchase around it, God still got you. God still has you. The Lord is still your keeper. And there's still a place for you in that trapper keeper of God for even the most gnarliest of things that you can't get your arms around, that you will not, that you haven't processed. One of the great gifts, I believe, of the next life is that when we see through a glass dimly, we will see face to face. We will work even the things that we carry our whole life, even the limp that we've walked through, like Jacob through, or like Joshua through this world, or Jacob through this world, that even the limp that we walk with, we will one day walk straight. And that all of those things will find their ways in the great promise of God's kingdom. Because the Lord has kept us, and we are a kept people. I want to try and drive this home maybe by just thinking about the creation story. We've particularly in good Protestant circles, we've been given the story around the notion that we got kicked out of the garden. There's that Adam and Eve screwed it up. We can argue about. We've been arguing about who's to blame. We can argue about that sometime later. But we can say that they were expelled from the kingdom, and that their expulsion from the garden was just this horrible screw up by humanity, in which we are now kind of bound in the material elements of the world. And because we're bound in this materiality, we have to contend with evil, and we have to be broken, and our back has to itch in places that we can't reach it, and all of the things that we now contend with. And all of it, fifth grade recorder recitals, the whole thing. We're all of it is because we're bound in this flesh and blood and time and space, and that whole thing has been kind of lathered and sprayed down and coated and painted with more coats of paint by more preachers about this notion of our original sin and the way we've just messed it up. And we can take that in. But I want to submit to you and remind you that our life in the material, our life in creation, our life back then that Adam and Eve were given outside the garden, and the life that you and I are given right here and right now, was an incredible gift from God to be able to find our way to connection and creation with Him. That it was the ultimate in keeping. When Adam and Eve eat of the garden of the fruit of the garden of the garden of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, they eat of it not because they were never going to eat of it, but because they weren't ready for it. They were always destined to eat from the tree of the garden, from the tree. They were always destined to have that fruit be a part of them. They simply weren't ready for that level of holiness, that level of creation. And that God's creation and God's gift to us was to come into this life and to be able to slow it all down in this temporal and material body, and that in that we might come to know again and again and again God's keeping of us. That actually the expulsion from the garden, original sin, blah 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 blah, shame, was actually the greatest act of keeping that God has ever done for humanity. It says, how are we gonna still manage to pull off this being friends thing? Well, okay, we'll do it this way. The Lord is your keeper, your shade on your right hand. He's got you in everything that you're doing, everything that you've done, everything, in fact, that you ever will do. God has got you. And there's no truth that's going to just blow you away. There's no darkness that is going to completely swallow you up. There is a folder for everything in your life in God's Trapper Keeper for you, even with a big fat kitten on it, and maybe it's blue, that God has you so completely, so beautifully, so wonderfully, that the things that you don't know, the things that you can't get your arms around, the things that you're contending with that are beyond your contention, God already has them. And God already has them solved. Whether in this life or the next or however it will come to pass, I don't know. You don't know. But the promise and the beauty of this invitation back to the garden, of this joyous reception back home, is ever and always and began and ended by our gaze towards the holy mountain. From where I lift my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? It comes from the one who keeps us, who keeps all our griefs, all our fears, all our challenges, all our difficulties, right where they need to be. Some of them unknown, some of them before our eyes, some of them held in the palm of his hand, but all of them within the grace and the folder and the love and the gift that God has for each one of us. Friends, go forward today and know that you're kept by God. Know that God has you, just has you. In the things that, in all of the solutions and all of the problems and everything in between, all of the heartbreak and all of the wonder, God has you from this day forth and forevermore. This is my hope for you today. I hope you have a wonderful and beautiful day. I am so glad my friends Jeremy and Robin are here today. That's such a gift. And they had Trapper Keepers. Can you believe it? It's like we set it up. All right. Peace and grace to you, my friends. Donna, my friend Phyllis is being released from hospital tomorrow. She's coming. Oh, I have blessings upon you. I hope that you can care for her well. So we'll keep Phyllis in our prayers for sure. All right, friends. Peace and grace to you. And we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.